Welcome to True Stories of Pesticide Exposure. Tonight, we take you to the Pacific Northwest, to a small town located on the Olympic Peninsula. Betty is a turf and ornamental pesticide applicator. Today, she's preparing to apply some herbicide on this residential lawn. Oh, now that's a bad break. So Betty did the right thing. What could have been a major problem was contained because of proper planning. Now, let's visit a vineyard. Bert is preparing a spray batch, and he gets a little sloppy. So Bert didn't have any clean water to rinse his eyes before he was rushed off to the clinic. Bert should have considered wearing a good pair of goggles or a face shield for eye protection while mixing. He should have read the label for product-specific eye protection instructions. Also, anytime a pesticide label states concern for eye injury, carry eye wash with you. The worker protection standards require eye wash if the label specifies goggles. Bottom line, always have your decontamination supplies nearby. Thanks for watching True Stories of Pesticide Exposure. Until next week, be safe.
Welcome to the show that makes you say, "Why are we watching this?" The Decon Show. And here's your host, that zany Bobo.
Alrighty then, you know how this show works. We invite amateur entertainers to come on stage and perform. If the performance is terrific, our judges give them a score. If, on the other hand, their performance is awful, which usually happens, one of our terrific judges can put the hammer to them, sounding the alarm. Okay, our first contestant doesn't mind. She's a mixer-loader who works for a nursery. I love you, Bobo! Okay. Hey, that wasn't nice. She didn't even get to start her act. Why'd you sound the alarm?
Never hug someone when you could have pesticide residues on your clothing. I mean, she shouldn't be hugging anyone when she has residue on her coveralls. She needs to go home, shower, change her clothes, and then come in.
You mean she could have exposed me? Yikes! Okay, our next contestant is a turf ornamental applicator who surely must shower and change his clothes as soon as possible after pesticide application. So I'm gonna go wash up. Take it away, the stage is all yours.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Judge number one, why'd you sound the alarm?
It's clear he is wearing pesticide-contaminated shoes. Look at the orange dye. You know, he could be spreading pesticide everywhere he steps.
Let's go. Let's pack it up. Hey. Well, our final contestant is a farm mechanic. Wow, you're clearly the winner! Great job.
That's right, Bobo. Clearly this contestant didn't expose us to pesticides.
Yeah.
That's right, Bobo. At work they asked me to repair a pesticide sprayer. I was very careful not to take pesticide residue home. When I got home, I left my boots outside. I took off the rest of my work clothes and kept them separate from the family laundry. Then I took a shower and changed into my fancy dancing clothes.
Well, looks like our final contestant gets points for cleanliness. He did everything right. He cleaned his PPE at work. He left his shoes outside his house. He changed his clothes and made sure they wouldn't get mixed in with regular laundry. And he washed up. Unfortunately, though, we are out of time. So remember, you'll know if your bucket gets sick because it'll look a little pale. Good night, everyone, and have a happy tomorrow.
Gloves, gloves, gloves. We've got gloves, hundreds of them. Yes, we do, because we're the House of Gloves.
Do you have CDs?
No,
Do you have goggles?
no, and don't be cute. We have gloves, thousands of them. Gloves for every occasion. We have formal gloves, stylish gloves, sports gloves, and even medically invasive gloves.
Medical gloves?
Don't ask. But boy, howdy do we have gloves, millions of them. Our special this week is internitrile gloves for those pesticide handling tasks that require extra dexterity, like changing out nozzles on a sprayer. They're thin, only 3 mils, and oh so much better than big clumsy gloves. Wear the clumsy gloves over the top for the big jobs, but keep those nifty thin ones inside so you never get the urge to be without gloves.
You gotta wear them or go blind.
Remember, just slip them on before you put on your regular gloves. It's that easy to stay protected. So get yourself down to the House of Gloves. We'll throw in a pair of goggles absolutely free.
All claims of blindness are not supported by scientific research. Remember to wash your gloves when you're done with your work.
We're just crazy about gloves.
Coming up on the Pesticide Broadcasting Network, your decontamination station. This pesticide applicator has been at it all morning, working hard. Looks like he could use a break. But hold on. Oh no, that's a big mistake. See what he's doing wrong? Can you just imagine how contaminated that cell phone is? Oh my. And how about this aerial applicator? He has a lot of acres to fly today. This is the money time of year, and he needs a little more caffeine. But he doesn't pay attention to contamination issues. Can you spot his mistake? Find out in this week's Exposure Bloopers and Blunders.
I see you have a rash on your arm. When did it first show up?
I don't know. The rush comes and goes.
So how long has it been coming and going?
Several months, maybe 4.
What do you think it's from?
I wish I knew.
What do you do for work?
I work for an implement dealership that sells tractors and big field sprayers. I'm a mechanic, and I service both growers and custom applicators.
Like crop dusters? You're an airplane mechanic?
No. I work on ground sprayers.
Does the rash typically show up before or after you work on these rigs?
After. Sometimes the day after later, and other times just a few hours after I work in the rigs.
Do you only get the rash on your arm, or does it ever appear on your legs or back?
No, I only get this nasty rash right here on my forearms.
Do you think it's from the exposure to the pesticide residue on the equipment?
I never thought of that. Do you think that may be it?
Could be. Do you wear protective gear like long-sleeved coveralls, chemical-resistant gloves when you work on the sprayers either in the shop or the field?
Only coveralls when it's cold. Otherwise, a teacher and no. I don't wear gloves.
Does your company require that the sprayers be decontaminated before you work on them?
Decontamination? I wouldn't know. I only work on the equipment when they call me in.
Look, I think you're having a reaction caused by the pesticide exposure from the equipment you work on.
What? Exposure to pesticide is causing the rash? I don't even spray pesticide. I only work in the equipment when they call me in. Can't believe this.
You've got to protect yourself before you work on equipment that has been used to apply pesticides. If you work on it in a farm shop, make sure it's been decontaminated. Whether it's a field or farm repair, protect yourself with PPE and decontaminate yourself and your PPE when you're finished.
Okay.
Did you know that farmers have regulations to protect their own mechanics? Their employees are classified as pesticide handlers at the Federal Worker Protection Standards. You should heed the WPS training and decontamination requirements. Also, when you work on any equipment, find out if it was decontaminated first.
What is worker protection standard? And I don't work for the farmer. I work for an implement dealer. So does the worker protection standards apply to me?
WPS, or Worker Protection Standard, is a federal regulation to protect farm and custom applicator employees. I'm not going to go into detail, but mechanics that are employed by either of those would fall under the regulation. That means they need to be trained on how to reduce pesticide exposure and use PPE. But the Worker Protection Standard doesn't apply to you since you work for an implement dealer. However, the standard and regulations are good management practices you and your boss should consider. You should be wearing PPE to protect yourself from pesticide exposure, not because it's the law, but because it's the smart thing to do.
That sounds reasonable. I'll talk to my boss about getting some spray rig decontamination procedures put in place. I sure don't like this rush, and it could have been worse. There seems to be things we can do to reduce pesticide exposure. I'll get to work on the bus for making spray rig decontamination a priority.
It's a good idea to be proactive. The spray rigs should be decontaminated before they come into the shop and before off-season storage. You need to know your exposure concerns when you get called to do a field repair. Ask to see the pesticide label before working on the equipment and make sure you have all the proper PPE.
Yep, I'll do that from now on. Now, if only this rush will go away, at least I know how to prevent it from happening.
That's right. It's your life and you should take precautions against pesticide exposure. If you don't, you could have bigger problems than this itchy rash.
Coming up on the Pesticide Broadcasting Network, your decontamination station. It's lunchtime for this government worker. Will he actually eat that sandwich? And hold on. Another day, another plugged nozzle. We see it over and over again, using bare hands to clean a nozzle. And look at this. It's the infamous blowing on a clogged nozzle routine. Will they ever catch a clue? Find out in the next Exposure Bloopers and Blunders.
Empowered with the gift of flight and an uncanny sense for pesticide exposure dangers, Super Bee patrols the skies, using his Super B vision to ferret out possible sources of pesticide contamination. To some who know him, he's an ordinary university extension educator. To those who've seen him transformed, he's a drone bee with 1,000 eyes. He is Super B. A local grower is hosting a barbecue for his employees and their families. We find them gathered around the shop.
Wow, another piece of spray equipment that wasn't decontaminated. Will farms and application businesses never learn? They're putting themselves, their workers, and their families at risk.
Hey, look at me, I'm Dad. It's time to spray.
Hey, it's Super B.
Hey kid, don't go near that equipment. It's contaminated, and we wouldn't want you to be exposed to pesticides.
Others are at risk here.
So, Super B explains to the grower that he must move his guests away from the contaminated area and tell them to wash their hands and face.
You have pesticide residues on some of your application equipment, and that little boy over there just about climbed onto that contaminated tractor and sprayer. You've put everyone here at risk this afternoon.
I'm sorry about that.
Don't you remember your basic pesticide training? Any residues on plants, machinery, or clothing can be transferred onto people if they brush against the contaminated area. Then those pesticides can enter their bodies through their eyes if they touch them, their mouths if they eat, drink, smoke, or chew tobacco. Some materials can even readily enter through skin. Make sure you keep people away from your contaminated equipment today, and in the future clean it after each, yes I said each use, to minimize the concern.
When Super B returned the next day, the grower had enlisted the help of all of his employees. He made sure they wore their properly cleaned and fitted PPE. It took a team effort to decontaminate the shop area and keep it that way, and by having all of his employees involved, it served as a training lesson on pesticide exposure and the need for decontamination.
Hey, it's Super B!
Now that's awesome. Remind your employees to keep their vehicles, sprayers, lunch areas, and bathrooms clean. Super B, away!
Well, that's the end of another fine day of programming at the Pesticide Broadcasting Network. Our mission in life is to make sure that you, our loyal audience, is safe and healthy. So let's recap what we've seen today. People who handle pesticides in the workplace are at risk. Staying safe is everybody's business. Employers need to implement policies that protect their employees from pesticide exposure. This includes providing safety training, personal protective equipment, and adequate decontamination facilities and supplies. Supervisors need to make sure that employees follow safe workplace practices. Employees need to follow the policies and practice that you've learned from training, including what you've heard right here on PBN. Make sure you properly decontaminate your personal protective equipment, application equipment, and service vehicles each and every time you apply pesticides. When handling pesticides, always be prepared. Have decontamination supplies handy. This is especially important in case of exposure, but also necessary in order to practice routine decontamination procedures. Take the time to get the PPE clean. Don't take shortcuts, they put you and your family at risk. We all don't have Super B vision, but it's important to look for and recognize contaminated surfaces on application equipment, your PPE, and areas where you may transfer residues. Remember that residues may be present even if you can't see them. Take special care with your personal hygiene, and like the trainers have preached for years, wash before and after you go to the bathroom. Folks, it's our lifelong ambition for all of you to stay healthy. Even though you work around pesticides, be smart. Wash yourselves and your PPE. Don't take contaminated items into your home. There are tried and true decontamination practices to keep you healthy and your family safe. Be safe, because a happy, healthy you is our goal. After all, our business can't survive without you. Join us tomorrow for another broadcasting day. Good night.